Hey everybody, today we're talking about our sixth rule, the coordinating or paired adjectives rule. And before we begin, we really need to make sure we understand, one, what an adjective is, but also what the word coordinate or coordinating means. So first, an adjective is a word that modifies or describes a noun. This will be important because in every one of these examples, we're talking about commas with paired adjectives. You need to know what an adjective is. You should also want to know what a noun is, which is a person, place, thing, or idea. For coordinates, we've already talked about coordinating conjunctions, but we didn't really discuss the idea of what coordinate meant. We talked about subordinating, which means of lesser importance or of lesser value. A coordinate means just a little bit different. It means of the same order of degree or equal in rank or importance. So with coordinating conjunctions, what happened is we had two complete independent thoughts. They were both complete sentences. And the fanboy, the coordinating conjunction, connected them to show how they were compared. They would have been two independent sentences by themselves, independent clauses, but the coordinating conjunction with the comma made those connect and showed their similarity, what their connection was. Subordinating, on the other hand, did the opposite. By adding a subordinating conjunction, we made one of those dependent clause, meaning not a complete sentence, so that made it of lesser value. With coordinating adjectives, it shows that the adjectives are of equal importance in describing the noun because both adjectives can separately work and describe the noun without needing the other adjective. And so we'll look at that and see how commas make that happen. So let's look at a few examples here of coordinating and paired adjectives and just the opposite. And notice that I try to keep the red adjective the same to show the difference between the two. So for coordinating and paired adjectives, we have I ordered a delicious spicy quesadilla. I needed a warm, cozy blanket. And it was a difficult, lengthy quiz. And in all three of these examples, our noun is quesadilla blanket quiz, same with the three below, and they're being described by those adjectives. And in those ones, we need a comma. But in the next ones, we wouldn't need a comma. I ordered a delicious steak quesadilla. I needed a warm flannel blanket. It was a difficult multiple choice quiz. So the question is, what's the difference between the combinations at the top versus the combinations at the bottom? And so when you look at it closely, the difference is pretty noticeable. In the top example, we have adjectives that work independently to describe the noun. For example, I could say, I ordered a delicious quesadilla. I could say, I ordered a spicy quesadilla. These two words are working separately. They don't need to be connected for this sentence to make sense. And in that regard, having them side by side, I could actually flip these two adjectives and there wouldn't be a problem there. This is just kind of a reminder because when we talked about a list of items using commas with a series, you could also rearrange the items in a list because the comma kind of acts and shows that these things could be moved around. They're interchangeable. But in the next three examples, we couldn't really do that. They have to stay in the same order and work together, and if they don't, it's not going to make as much sense. So with these two rules in mind, it's actually pretty easy to test out and see whether or not you need a comma. So let's figure out how we do that. So there are three tests you can try to use and see if you have coordinating or paired adjectives, and in that case you would need a comma. The first test is, can you replace the comma with the word and? We talked a little bit about that Oxford comma debate and how the word and is replaced by a comma when we're making a list. The question is a useful one because that means that if we can put the word and in there and it still works, then we're in a good spot. Test number two is just flipping the adjectives. Once again, coordinating adjectives are equal. They're independently just as powerful as their counterparts. So that means that we should be able to flip them and the meaning shouldn't change. And if you want a third optional test, combine the tests, flip the adjectives and add the word and we can see what happens with that. So we're going to go through a few examples here to show you how this rule works, how these tests work, and hopefully they'll help clarify a few things. So here's an example we saw earlier. I ate a delicious spicy quesadilla. The comma is there because once again, these two are independent, they're coordinate, and we could, in theory, flip them or add the word and. So let's find out. For the first one, replacing the comma with and. I ate a delicious and spicy quesadilla. To me, that sounds perfectly fine and normal. That's a good sign. But just to be safe, we want to check the other two as well. Can you flip the adjectives? I ate a spicy, delicious quesadilla. That sounds good as well. And usually when those first two sound good, the third one sounds good enough when we flip it. I ate a spicy and delicious quesadilla. Once again, 3 for 3. This is a good example of how commas can be used to put two adjectives together that are independently describing the noun, in this case, the quesadilla. So let's try another one here that you just haven't seen yet. And I'll pause for a moment here to give you a second to look at the tests and make your decision before we go. So let's look at test number 1. The Bruins are a fantastic and hockey team. Just reading that sounds funny to me to say fantastic and hockey team. That's going to get an X in my book. But let's check the other two just to be safe. Can you flip the adjectives and keep the meaning? The Bruins are a hockey fantastic team. Now, if someone wanted to argue with me with the first one and say, okay, maybe there's a way that could work, the Bruins are a hockey fantastic team just sounds very wrong, and that's going to apply to the next one too. The Bruins are a hockey and fantastic team. It just feels a little off there. And for all three of these, I can see that even if I want to argue the first one could possibly be true, although it clearly is not, there's just no way those second tests and the third test that they're going to work for this. So there's no need for a comma because fantastic is having to go in the same sequence. It has to stay fantastic at the start, and then it goes hockey, then team. Otherwise, the sentence gets a little bit messed up. So let's try this one more time with an example from the start. So we already know it's going to be, I needed a warm flannel blanket, no comma needed, but let's see the logic behind that. So test number one, can you replace the comma with the word and? I needed a warm and flannel blanket. Honestly, doesn't sound too bad, except for it seems a little odd logically that you'd ask for a warm and flannel blanket. In reality, you'd probably know you want a flannel blanket and that you just want it to be warm. But it doesn't sound that bad. So I'm going to give it a question mark, but it just feels a little off. Now, test number two is the one that really jumps out at me. Can you flip the adjectives? I needed a flannel warm blanket. And those words just don't normally go in that order. It seems odd to ask for a flannel blanket that's warm since flannel is kind of traditionally one of those warmer fabrics. And just the way it works doesn't sound right, which means that this one and even the next one where it says I needed a flannel and warm blanket, just the order doesn't sound right to me. So I feel like there's other ways I could write this if I wanted to try to find a way to split up flannel and warm, and just having the adjectives back to back the way they are at the start with warm flannel blanket really does make the most sense. So I would say no comma needed, and we're all set with this example. So let's end with some tips and tricks and just some reminders to make sure this is clear. So if you feel good at this point, you can just stop, but if you want some extra tips on how to check this rule out and make sure you need or don't need a comma, these are the tips for you. So first of all, when the first adjective relates to a number, you will most likely, if not always, not need a comma. The two largest dogs were chasing each other. There were several vegetarian meals on the menu. You can never say their largest and two dogs were chasing. There were vegetarian and several meals on the menu. It doesn't sound right because the number is describing how many large dogs there are, how many vegetarian meals there are. It has to be in that order. Likewise, a compound noun, which means we have two words kind of being combined to make a noun. This is one case where they have to stay in the same place. We saw this with the hockey team earlier, and we're seeing it again in this example. I watched the old rickety washing machine dance around. Now, these tests get a little complicated when you have more than two adjectives. And if I did the test here, I'd see that old and rickety are coordinated. I could say the rickety old washing machine, the old and rickety washing machine. But if I tried to mix this up a bit more and say the old washing rickety machine, that sounds a little bit funny because washing machine is a compound noun. They need to stay together. So I put a comma between old and rickety, but washing needs to always be in that spot, so there's no comma to tell people that washing machine is one item. And one last note, although this is probably clear from older grammar lessons we've had, a hyphen means the adjectives are meant to be in that order because the hyphen combines two words that are normally not connected. So if I said the car was bluish green, or if I had a bluish green car, a bluish is connected to green in that sequence. I wouldn't change anything. So remember, you only need a comma between adjectives if they are interchangeable because they work separately and equally to describe the noun, and that comma tells people that we can flip those adjectives and it wouldn't change the meaning of the sentence. Make sure to use your test to see if you need a comma or not, and use multiple tests because sometimes the test or one test won't be enough and it might sound a little iffy. Using two or three can always get the job done. And numerical adjectives, compound nouns, hyphenated adjectives, it's often a sign that no comma is needed, and really it's a sign always that no comma is needed. So that's it for this video. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, and thanks for watching.